Oh yes, I have in the studio an economist who's going to discuss with me stimulus package in COVID-19. Thank you for coming, Manuel Boigbe.
Thank you, Blessing.
Okay, now we watched that report done by Fusa Wangwe on the compliance level of some filling stations in Benin City to the new pump price of 123 naira 50 kobo. Why do you think there is this hesitation by some filling stations to comply with the new price?
I think it's the monitoring process. Because if the monitoring process is effective enough, compliance would be almost total. So, of course, the consumers are willing and happy at the reduction. So, it is the compliance level is with the marketers. So, if there is a more effective monitoring, which I think the regulators and government should put in place, why not? They would comply.
Okay, now the reduction from 125 naira, initially it was 145 naira, and then it was brought down to 125, now to 123 naira 50 kobo. Is that any relief at all in this time?
No, basically it's a relief in a way. If you consume 100 liters of petrol in a week, that's across the board. It's like 23 naira, 22 naira off a liter from all of the liter you consume in a week. So it's certainly a relief for families and consumers.
Okay, now let's talk about the stimulus package. Now, much has been talked about how government should do something to cushion the effects of coronavirus on citizens, to households and to businesses. Now, the federal government is planning to battle COVID-19 with 500 billion naira stimulus package. Now, much of this it plans to channel into the health sector. What's your take on the what this money is meant for, the area it is going to?
Okay, thank you, Blessing. My take would be, let's start from this, from where it really should start from. What is a stimulus package? Basically, we call it economic stimulus. Why do you need to stimulate? You are needing to stimulate a comatose economy, an economy that's having a challenge, an economy that's likely to get into, that's in recession or likely to get into recession. Obviously speaking, from across the world, there is a suspicion, there is obviously recession lurking around. There is a direct impact already from the COVID-19. So whether you like it or not, businesses have been closed down, household income has been affected, business activity has been affected all along, and it's been almost the economy would be, so projections and budgets is all failing. Of course, it's affecting everybody, and then there would need to be a stimulus to get it back. Why that for a long run would be done later, CBA before these 500 million had come out with something around, with some policies first week or second week in March. We just highlight what you call, monetary approach. There are two stimulus you would likely want to do, fiscal and monetary. Now, the one the federal government is planning to do, yes, you call that a fiscal stimulus. But the question, yes, the details are not very clear yet. Yeah, majorly is going to revamp the health sector. The details still need to come out for us to be able to appraise that spending. But talking about direct payments, for instance, you ask me, that's where I think the issues are. Issues are there because for us as an economy, we've not been able to do too well or too good in inclusive economy. That is, a lot of people are off our banking lines. So how can you get them? So direct distribution is a difficult thing. And of course, it's something we cannot rely on. So that's where the challenge is. Otherwise, why not? The economy needs to be stimulated. The health sector basically is a direct hit, one now that would need to have to provide succor for in the pandemic. So that's where we are.
Okay, now still talking about the government intervention going majorly to the health sector. Some would argue that there is a ministry already for that. Now, why would government put much of the money that maybe should have gone in other sectors to the health sector at this time?
At this time, the thinking is that we are the center of it. But if you ask, that look like a fire brigade approach.
Okay.
Just like you said, there is a ministry of health. Is the funding, this intervention, going to be spent through the Ministry of Health? If yes, then what are the numbers that makes up for this spending? That is one side of it. Because otherwise, when you eject such funds through other means beside the health sector, then the question would be, what therefore is the health ministry really doing? So, but as of this time, yes, why not? This is about the time the challenge is here. This is about the time that some immediate spending would have to be done, but majority of it still will have to fall or go through the Ministry of Health. That's the thinking.
Okay. Now, another aspect the federal government is looking at is also giving fiscal relief for state governments, including a moratorium on some CBN loans, which repayments could be suspended when allocations fall below certain thresholds.
Absolutely. I said that before. CBN came with very brilliant cushioning effect of a brilliant approach on cushioning the effect on intervention loans. For instance, they've had to drop the interest on intervention loans from 9% to 5%. Wonderful. They've had to go talk to money lending banks to make sure that they look at restructuring facilities. They've had to look at moratoriums for, looking at moratoriums for. So those are basically monetary approaches to cushioning the effect or a stimulus. I think that's in itself brilliant. It is expected that sometime this month or in the very near future, maybe early May, some additional measures will come, because it is looked at like that may not just be sufficient.
Okay.
Some other measures will need to come. And if you ask me, that look like the monetary approach presently look like going to be more effective, more direct than fiscal. Okay. More effective, more direct, because the multiplier effect of monetary policy on spending, investment, production, employment, and wages is almost like a direct one, and something you can monitor.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the CBN started its intervention early March. Okay, way before the federal government. Yeah. Now, in the CBN stimulus package, there are two categories majorly. There's 50 billion there that is meant for households and
SMEs.
MSMEs, yes. How do you think this stimulus package will be given? Because it's going to come in form of loans and not in grants. So how do households, how do MSMEs access these loans?
Okay, there are criteria already, those CASHI that CBN already gave to. SME, the maximum SME can access under that window is 25 million. Okay. And then household, 3 million.
Okay.
The criteria I know would be very clear. It's going to come through the money lending banks, but supervised by microfinance institutions. I think the criteria would be very clear, and then pre-qualifications for the loan would be very easy to define, as well as the terms too are going to be rather soft, okay, than the normal commercial loan. So it's not a difficult thing. If you ask me, like I said earlier, it's a wonderful monetary stimuli for the economy. We expect more to come from CBN, and I would not want to argue that for an economy like us, monetary policy seems to have been a lot more effective by reasons I gave earlier. The fiscal policies, fiscal measures, not as if they are not very effective, but the institutions have not been so clearly defined. Maybe perhaps that is why the 500 billion thing seemed to be causing a lot of little question. But with clearly defined processes for administering the fiscal policy, okay, why not? We would get the results.
All right, now before we leave the CBN alone and get to other organizations or institutions that are offering stimulus package in this time, the second category is the 100 billion naira, which is meant for the health sector, for indigenous pharmaceutical companies, as well as other value chain that offer healthcare. Now, what would you say is the most impressive in that category? What impressed you more about that category?
Very interesting, because maybe for the first time, really, that we're looking at our health sector to prepare it for emergencies like we are in now. Well, I know that this pandemic is about the worst we've had the world has had in a very long time. But some health sectors, some medical were more prepared than we are. Thankfully, we have not been worse hit. If it goes far much more than we are now, it would have revealed how not to prepare medically we are. So for me, that 100 billion is a thought in the very good direction. It will put in some level of preparedness into our medical. It will tackle medical issues and health issues far much more than we're presently. So it's a wonderful intervention that has been put in place.
Okay. Now, in terms of the state, it seems like Lagos State is the foreigner when it comes to providing stimulus package in this time. Other states seem to be still trying to figure out what to put together. But Lagos State is targeting for the first phase 200 households, and what they're looking at is the provision of food packs. Should that be what the people need right now, just food packs? Or it should have been in form of cash?
You know, basically,
what would have been a better stimulus package?
If you ask me, it would be in form of verifiable method. You understanding? When we don't have statistics you can closely monitor, and then mismanagement is not ruled out. But if you were going to distribute, when I was talking about inclusive economy, inclusive financial system, if you use the BVM, for instance, going through the CBN money, the banking system, you know those whose turnover is below a threshold. We have over 70% of our country living below a poverty line. So those are the worst hit, those are the vulnerable. If there's anything that any government would be doing, is to attend to the need of the most vulnerable, the worst hit of any challenge, and those are the people. And how do we identify them? We would identify them by a verifiable method, by a verifiable means, because accountability is key. When you say you distributed foodstuff to 200, let's not, this is my take. Let's not do it the way others are doing it, because we don't have the same structures others have. If America,
by others, you mean other countries?
Other countries. Okay. If America says they distributed food to 200,000 homes, I can tell you that the 200,000 homes have home addresses, have IDs that you can verify, have phone numbers that you can verify. But we can't do that here. But if you did say you credited 200,000 names in Nigeria with a specified BVN using a one-touch on button from CBN via money banks, I tell you those are verifiable processes. Our system may not have that's why systems and institutions are necessary to develop. Our system may not have developed, but we want to use methods that will make for ease of accountability and all of that. So yes, relief packages like direct cash is not bad, but the making sure that we can verify the process is also imperative.
Okay. Now, a recent development took place in Ghana, and Nigeria seems to be toiling that path. In Ghana, the government is planning to offer the people 3 months of free electricity and water. Now, the National Assembly in Nigeria was advocating for 2 months of free electricity for Nigerians, which the discos have responded to now that they are in agreement with that, and they will put modalities in place to see how Nigerians can get 2 months of free electricity. Would that qualify as relief or stimulus?
It's a relief.
Okay.
Not a stimulus.
Okay. Now, is it something that is feasible? Though they have said they will put modalities in place to see how that can be possible, but do you think it's feasible, given the fact that the discos have often complained about the high rates of high cost of power?
It is possible, but there is usually what we call a crowding out process. Now, what that means is that the revenues expected from household electricity consumption for 2 months is grilled out from the budget which the discos have. And so that's where the federal government can come in. But I can tell you that is a direct relief in the 2 months to the homes that would have paid electricity bills and they would not get it. And that's a direct deduction from the revenue expected from the discos that they would not get. And of course, if they did get an intervention funding, that is, the disco did get an intervention funding from the federal government, you could see that these are direct relief, having direct impact. And of course, the crowding out is also very direct. So the same thing, for instance, the petrol you just mentioned.
Yes.
That is, we know what consumption of fuel is. We know what the discount is, 22 naira, 20 naira per liter. You can take that, just, it's a straight line method, and you understand or you know what that is. So for me, those are direct relief. It's a welcome one. Ghana did it. We are going to do it. Why not?
Okay. Now, on a final note, even as more states are still trying to see what they can put together in form of relief and stimulus package for citizens at this time, what do you think should be the first consideration? Because like you rightly mentioned, we do not have a system where it's easy for you to just identify and say, okay, this is who. Distribution is a major challenge. So what then should we be doing? We've seen distribution of food packs. We've seen distribution of cash. What should we do so that we have the stimulus package that we put together becomes very, very effective?
This haven't happened before. That is, a pandemic this big, this large, is devastating. Haven't happened in a very long while. The last, the world recorded something like this around 1918 and thereabout. But in the future, we should begin to prepare for how to identify, because the challenge we're having here is that we can't identify who is who and who is collecting what is the issue we have with distribution. Why not? Then two, a lot of institutions and organizations and well-meaning individuals, network individuals are doing what they're doing. We cannot stop the high net worth individual for doing what they're doing. We cannot stop charitable organizations like churches and a few others from doing what they're doing. That's okay, because they understand their target group. But for institutions like government, in the future or before the foreseeable future, is to ensure that we better our statistics. That's human statistics, and then identity, so we can identify who. Then inclusion policies, we should pursue them to their logical conclusion. For instance, the national ID, the BVN processes, these are all processes we could fall back to in the future to use. In the interim, the BVM is still something you cannot beat, because it's a unique identity. banking identity. It's have a few, background details that can also be worked with. What are those background details? You do know the turnover of those, the money banks know what to do with that. So I think on that, why not direct cash for me is recommended. A few other reliefs are recommended that we could use for now. But in the future, we should look at making sure that we invest in data. Data. And data.
Okay, we've run out of time. This is as far as we can take on the show. Thank you very much, Emmanuel Bagwe, for coming on the show today.
Welcome,
all right, stay safe, and whatever help you can offer to your neighbor at this time is very, very much welcome. I am Blessing AHA, and happy Easter celebration to you in advance.
This is ITV, certainly the best.